focus on yourself, on your faith, on your dreams, on your mind, on your health, yeah. You gotta work, never tell, keep your head down, find what you love and excel, yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hometown Conversations. You know, some days we start these things off and I have a hard time talking. Other times, you know, we forget to press record. Other times I just don't use my name and use somebody else's because I'm reading off a script, and that works too sometimes. Anyway, my name is Roman. I'm going to be joined, of course, here in a little bit with Jill and our guest for today, Candace Hoversten. So one of the things we want to talk about today is, you know, the past 2 years, 22 months to be exact, has taken a toll on all of us. Whether we realize it or not, we're in a different reality now, both in life, politically, and those around us. Some of that's been good, some of it hasn't. It's taken away people we know. It's taken away friends and family. It has taken away a life that we used to know. We may find ourselves with more of a quick trigger when someone disagrees with us. Maybe a friend aligns differently, and now we suffer from a lost relationship or friendship. It could be that over the past 2 years, you worry now, more than ever before. About what? You can't really put your finger on it, but it's there. Many who I talk to say that they're burnt out, from teachers to parents, healthcare workers to restaurant workers and more. It's touched us all in ways that we're just really starting to come to terms with right now. Over the past couple of years, mental health has been brought to the forefront in ways that in prior years maybe weren't looked at in such a favorable light. Some people have taken to the internet to voice their frustrations or their pain, and some have sought out therapy from trained professionals. Today in the United States, around 20% of adults experienced a mental illness, equivalent to about 50 million Americans. A growing percentage of youth in the United States live with major depression. 15% of youth experienced a major depressive episode in the past year, almost 1.5% increase. In the bottom-ranked states, up to 19% of youths ages 12 to 17 experienced major depression. The most common mental illness in the United States are anxiety disorders, which affect about 40 million adults, about 18% of the population. Younger adults are more likely to report symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder since the pandemic started. And there are two sides to this, those that are living with it and those that want to help. 3 in 10 people have said that they have struggled with some sort of mental health since the pandemic started. The majority of those being anxiety, stress, a depressive phase, isolation, or a feeling of being alone. 85% of people say that their mental health issues are causing sleep deprivation, poor physical health, reduced happiness at home, suffering family relationships, or isolation from friends. It's been tough, but in keeping with our plan to start the year off to take care of ourselves better, both physically and mentally, today we're joined by Candace Hoversten, a therapist with NorthStar Counseling here in Hutchinson. Candace, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, make sure we turn all the mics on too, so that always sounds fun.
Good.
So, so welcome to the podcast. We're happy to have you here and have what I hope is a good open discussion about all sorts of things related to that. Because like we had talked about somewhat, mental health is one of those things that maybe in as recently as 2 years ago, maybe wasn't looked at with such open arms right now. I feel like with things that have gone on in pro sports and some of those things, people are really becoming like aware that it exists more than I think that people really wanted to give it credit for.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think there's so much current experiences of a lot of different emotions that we're just naming it.
Yeah.
And, you know, over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of issues coming to the forefront in a lot of different ways, mental health being one of them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like,
Right.
let's have the conversation about it and really normalize the fact that we are all directly or indirectly impacted by mental health.
And just like so many things in our society, from illnesses to all sorts of different social issues, it's not limited to any class of people, race of people, group of people. Prince Harry and Oprah sat down and talked about it, right? So like it can affect everyone, and it's just an important topic, and I think it's good that it's more on the forefront.
Yeah. So before we dive in, Candace, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? How did you find your way to the Hutchinson area?
Sure. So originally born in Southern California, so I'm a beach girl at heart. So I'm still by water, so I'll take that as I haven't strayed too far.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. I'll take any waterway. Prefer the salty type, but not too picky. From Southern California, my family moved up to Washington State, so really both the West Coast is still home. I have family in both California and Washington. And I guess, like a lot of mental health professionals, I won't speak for everyone, but in my circles of peers, it is not uncommon that we come to this field based on our own experiences, whether that's our personal experience or experiences of friends, family. So it was a early interest into the realm of psychology, looking across with my siblings of, how different we are, even under the same house, how we can have such vast different experiences and struggles, and really just continued to look around me, and really finding a lot of compassion, a lot of inspiration for people who have struggled in a lot of different areas, whether it's mental health, substance use. So I came out to Minnesota in 2005, with my husband here. He has a business here in Hutch, recently sold over the last few years. So he was a lot more solidified than I was. So I was much more willing to roam, still a bit of a gypsy spirit. So we'll see how long I stay in Hutch here. I've been in healthcare for 20 plus years, mental health for over 14. So I've been in the field for a few years in a lot of different contexts. So I bring bring a lot of different experiences to the table when I'm working with clients.
Nice.
Yeah.
When you talked about water, it's interesting. I lived in Colorado for a couple of years, and when I was getting ready to move, a lot of my friends there were like, aren't you going to miss the mountains? And they're beautiful. But internally, what I didn't say out loud was, if I don't see a body of water soon, like I grew up in Minnesota, but lakes everywhere. So I get it.
Yeah. Yep.
In some of these initial questions, Candace, we're going to break it down into two groups, adults and then sort of the teen kids,
Sure.
but specifically teens. And you and I had messaged back and forth a little bit, and you had mentioned for adults a common theme that you're experiencing in your job right now is this feeling of being overwhelmed by the simplest of things and not knowing why. Why do you think that is, and how can someone manage those feelings?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Roman, you were speaking to that too, where it's like, I'm just getting those comments and feedback from clients of like, I just can't put my finger on it. Just feels stressed.
Yeah.
And, really at the end of the day, that experience of stress from a biological perspective, I won't go too nerdy on you guys, but from a brain perspective, it's the same, whether it's small stress or big stress. But from a biological standpoint, stress is something that's arrhythmic, not predictable, not routine. We can't anticipate what's coming next. And I think a lot of where the world's at falls into that category in a lot of different ways and in really deep ways for people. And so it's that indirect stress and that experience of stress that really starts to tap our resources. It's real quick for us to lose sight of our internal resources, of who we are when we're at our best. It's hard to put that foot in front of us when there's this sort of aura of stress and overwhelm. So yeah, I think I've been less likely to jump into a diagnosis over the last couple years, just letting things kind of float in space for a little bit and just listening to what people are bringing in my clinical office as looking at it from just like a normal and adaptive experience. And so I use a lot of that language around experience versus symptom or disorder. Like we don't even know. I mean, The world is just, it's unpredictable, and there's so many variables. And so whether it's adults or teens, of just kind of pumping the brakes on what we're even labeling, because it's the anxiety, depression, stress, I mean, as a emotion, as an experience, that's across all humankind, right? That's a very normal part of the human experience. That is not a disorder. And so I just want to be real mindful that we're just normalizing that experience right now for people.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, very much so. So, and one of the things that we hear from sometimes from kids is that they don't feel heard. How do we help them with that a little bit better?
Yeah, and that, it goes alongside. I mean, when as an adult, when we're having the experience of stress and overwhelm, and we can't even put our finger on it, if we're not regulated ourselves, it's super difficult to be in regulation with somebody else, right? Co-regulation. So it's not that the intent isn't to not hear the teens and the kids of the world, but there is so much noise happening in our own experiences that it's hard to make that connection. So I think that they're experiencing that disconnection from us because of our overwhelm. That's sort of a byproduct, not the intent, but that's happening and that's real.
Yeah.
So along those lines, right? So Roman and I are parents. My son is 10. A lot of our listeners are parents, and I'm still relatively confident that my 10-year-old is still sharing a lot with me.
Yeah.
But I do notice, as every year, in a very normal developmental way, he's desiring more privacy, talking to me a little bit less. I've asked him questions about, is anybody in your class, interested in relationships yet? Are you? Oh, I wouldn't tell you that. All normal. I get that. But as they become teenagers, they tend to talk even less. So how do we know our kids are okay? How do we know that they're telling us what we need to know? How do we know that they're not harboring some big pain at school that we know nothing about? Like, how do we know they're all right?
Yeah, that's a deep question and a heavy one. I have 2 kids myself. My youngest had just turned 8 on Wednesday, so 8 and 9, soon to be 10. I'm in that window too, right? Just terrified as a parent. Right. No pressure being a professional, right? Am I doing this right? And also, I think, again, if we could step back and look at from a brain perspective of kids at any age, of their cognitive ability to use language and words and interpret their experience is not the same as adults. And so I think we sometimes default, because that's our skill as adults, or it should be our skill as adults, right? That cognitive ability to verbalize and to process. I think we go there sometimes too frequently with kids. And so from my perspective, it's really the nonverbal interactions that you're having, that connected time that you're just allowing space. And again, going back to what I spoke about earlier of like, if we're not regulated as an adult, we can't influence that regulation for our kids. Regulation is a skill. It is not an intuitive gift that we have. Babies cannot regulate themselves, right?
Absolutely.
And so what are we doing as adults to manage our own regulation and to offer some skills and some strategies? And more often than not, it's going to be nonverbal.
Sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
that's my perspective.
Yeah. I think we all have periods of time when we feel a little bit anxious or down, like our moods may swing a bit. How do we know that line between normal mood changes and one where we need to reach out for some help?
Yeah, I think the easy and complicated answer is I believe that we do know that line, right? And that line's different for everybody. That line of again, when I say regulation versus dysregulation, it's the goal isn't ever to be regulated all the time. I mean, if we're potentially a very well practiced Buddhist monk, possibly, we have a chance.
Right.
But today in Hutchinson, the goal is how do we know what dysregulation feels like within ourselves, and how do we catch it early and shift back towards regulation. Not that we're going to always land, but it's ultimately for me those regulation skills. So sometimes what happens, and certainly with adults more and more these days, it's not that we don't have skills to get regulated. Life's coming at us at a pace that we just didn't ever need to have skills for. And so we want to always go back to, what do we know? What's so deep and true to ourselves? What are our internal resources of like managing life? And in that place, kind of stepping forward and looking at what's hard, what's overwhelming. But it's not that line, that threshold is if you aren't sure how to get back to regulation or what that even looks and feel like, that's a good time to ask for some support.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Social media, I think, is a very divisive subject. Everybody has really strong feelings about if it's good for us or bad for us, but I think we all can admit one thing: it's here, right?
It's
It
here, yeah.
isn't going anywhere. So to say we can get rid of it and solve the world's problems is naive. How do you think social media can be used more effectively to bring people with mental health problems together and help them connect rather than isolating themselves at home?
Yeah, I think from a positive end, from a technology perspective, social media platforms, I mean, it just gives us an opportunity to connect with like-minded people outside of your geographic region. And so, I mean, I've seen a lot of different forums and groups pop up for people who are experiencing different things, so that you can find support. I mean, really from strangers in a way that wasn't ever attainable, that you had to walk into a room to seek some group support. And it's been a game changer from that perspective. And I think even, the shift that we've had to make as professionals in regards to offering virtual visits, I mean, that has, to me, expanded access and expanded support. So that if that falls in that bucket of social media and technology, I mean, I think it's a win for mental health. Podcasts, more and more, there's mental health podcasts, and just having the chance to integrate this into like daily life. You don't have to be the 20% with a diagnosed health condition to seek support or to call it out. It's all around us in every way.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Including social media.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, employee assistance programs that exist within their organizations. So they don't reach out and just have the opportunity just to talk with somebody too. So I think that's part of it as well. What do you think that where you land when it comes to the hopes and concerns for the community with the rise of mental health? And, even if it's just, like I said, over the last couple of years where we haven't had, we may be more isolated away from the people we want to. Like, we went to a very, very small music concert last night, and I didn't realize how much I missed being around groups of people, somewhat. And just in hearing something that we used to take for granted, just going and hearing live music, and the amount of I don't know if the right word is serotonin that I got back, but this good feeling like, there's hope. And sometimes I think some people don't have hope. We're trying to kind of come around to the reality that this might be what we're dealing with for a while.
Yeah.
So like what are kind of our hopes and maybe fears of what the community might have? And when I mean community, I'm not talking about necessarily Hutchinson, but the general public, so to speak. Are we hoping that it's more acceptable or whatever?
Yeah, I think the hope that I hold in even just normalizing the conversation around mental health is that just the deep belief for me that we're all wired for connection, right? And so mental health issues, anxiety, stress, depression, I mean, they can be really isolating issues. That generally do better the more connected we are with people. And, whether you're an introvert, I'm an introvert, right? So whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, that might look different, how many people are around you, how many people you're connected with. But those connections are really what co-regulates us in these times of stress. stress. And so from a community perspective, any opportunities to sort of lean in, offer grace, compassion, validation, understanding, this is across any issue. It always helps. It always feels better. And it doesn't matter whether we're virtual, social distancing, whatever the mask mandate is.
Right.
People are finding creative ways to continue to connect. And that's us as humans, connecting mammals. So the more we connect, the more safety, the more security that we all have.
Sure.
Yeah.
Candace, what do you do to support your own like emotional well-being?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm pretty open with clients about my own experiences, not, in trying to be on the line of not too much disclosure. But again, just from this normalizing perspective, you guys might know a guy, Steve Gosser. He talks a lot about, from a leadership perspective, leading yourself in terms of like knowing your tendencies, knowing your patterns. It's interesting because going through leadership myself, it's overlapping that giant framework with the clinical framework that I have. And same thing, so for all of us, we have stress tendencies. For some of us, we have a tendency to be more anxious. For some of us, we might have a tendency towards more depressiveness. And again, not as an experience, as an emotion, not a disorder, right? So just be careful. I'm not labeling that. For myself, I tend to move towards depression when I'm overwhelmed and anxious. And so really my go-to strategies for regulation is like really trying to connect deeply with my physical body.
Yeah.
And so it could be working out. I went for a run yesterday. It could be, where's my breath? I do a lot of work with Jamie over at Enzo Spa in regards to massage. So I tend to tap in some of the what they call somatic stuff, somatic experiences of like body work. It helps to ground me. I need to increase my energy. I need to tap into who I am. Those strategies look very different if you're on that anxiety spectrum. So again, it's knowing yourself, to lead yourself, whether that's physically, mentally, professionally, all the ways of knowing what your tendencies are.
What tools do you find to be useful for people that tend to be more anxious?
Yeah, so from an experience, both a emotional and a physiological experience of anxiety, it's everything gets amped up, right? So thoughts get big. Heart rate goes fast. Heat in our body usually rises. If we're experiencing a panic attack, our pupils will actually dilate. And so again, everything's like just super big. So for people who tend to be on that anxious spectrum of, we want to like rein things in. We want to offer some guardrails. Sometimes yoga is helpful. Again, the physical grounding of pushing into a wall or a yoga mat. Narrowing our focus, reining in our thoughts, right? So if I'm looking out this lovely window that you guys have in here, if I'm experiencing, if I was with a client who was experiencing like depressive experiences, I would say, what's the furthest thing you could see? Right? Because we want to expand that if we're experiencing depressive experiences. Versus somebody with anxiety, it's like, what's the closest thing you could see in like granular detail? So trying to rein in our thoughts.
Sure.
Rein in what's sort of the flood.
Oh, it's a really good comparison.
Yeah. So
Jill, what I heard in there is that we have to start running.
I heard that.
Yes.
And yoga.
Yoga.
Yep,
I can get down with yoga. Although yoga is very, it's a lot more difficult than what anybody watching it on TV will give it credit for. I remember the first time I did it and I had to get down like Warrior One or whatever it's called. I was grunting so loud, I'm sure people like outside the yoga studio could hear me. I'm positive of it. The other thing I heard is that we have to go and do more massages. So
I heard that as well.
I am all in on massages, just so you know.
You know, a side note, not to veer off track here too much, but it's interesting, some of the things you were saying. You talked about, Jamie, she also has the yoga studio. Shanda Kropp recently advertised on on the JRR yoga for kids, and it's from 5 to 10-year-olds, but I mentioned it to my son. He must be learning some of this language at school, because I asked him if he would want to do it, and he was like, yes, sometimes my mind is so full of so many things that I need to learn how to quiet it down. And I was like, wow, for just turning 10 years old, like that's some really good language and insight in, because he recognizes that his brain is going all the time. And he's like, I would love to take that class and learn how to quiet myself down a little bit. And I was like, wow, all right, good. So we're hoping to get on the next class. But yes, I heard we're supposed to run and get lots of massages.
Lots of massages. I heard that very
great
crystal,
advice. Yes.
crystal clear. I really appreciate
and
saying
I'll
that.
just add, I mean, you guys actually influenced me to sign up for that long run. So you are
Lord.
runners at heart. So running and yoga is similar in regards to, like, if you do it in any capacity, you are a runner. And you quote do yoga. So there's like, it's very inclusive. You do it and you're a runner.
I like that sentence.
you just
Kurt
do it.
mentioned this last week. How do you do it? And he's like, you just do it. But I like that. If you do it at all, you are one.
Yes.
I might sprint out to my car today, and I will thus be a runner. Candace, you are helpful in so many ways.
I know. This is like free advice here. Yeah, just if you do it, you are the thing.
You are the thing.
I like
so.
that.
Fish, you're a fisherman.
I guess.
Agreed.
I don't know why we gotta like justify or qualify.
No,
you
we
do
do
it
that
and
though,
you
don't
are.
we?
Yeah.
What you're saying is that I don't
a
have
lot.
to spend $60,000 on a boat and $10,000 on
No,
gear.
you can shoot it off the.
I can just throw it off the
Right
end of
in
the
the
dock
river.
and
Yeah.
perfect.
Boom, fisherman.
Not so sure if I
fisherman.
want to fish out of the river, but we're going to leave that
This
for
could apply to a lot of different things.
It's going to be
though.
a different conversation when we get down that road. No, I'm just kidding. I like the river here in town. It's very nice to go kayaking down. That's about it. That's one of the things I like to do, actually, is to go kayaking, kind of calm things down. It quiets everything down. So
Nature is great.
yeah, absolutely. So, Candace, what would you do if someone, or what should someone do if they're worried about any of these items that are coming up, whether it's loss of sleep or anxiousness or stress or feeling burnt out? What should they do?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to notice them without judgment.
Yeah.
Right, which is like the hardest thing to do. We generally notice them, and then we make real big judgments about them. You know, I must be overwhelmed. I knew I couldn't take this. This is getting too much. Can we just pause at the noticing what's happening? And when we're able to pause, if we can, that's usually when we have some sort of internal insight or resourcing to then know what we need to do next. Sometimes that is reaching out to a professional.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, for all practical purposes, access is limited in a lot of ways, just provider access, appointments, and, that's not the only way to access support. Sometimes that is, connecting with a coworker, connecting with your employer, like you said, Roman, for EAP services, whatever. If we can notice without judgment and just see what we might need, what could be helpful, without the judgment. I mean, you're talking about your son, Jill, and kids are super great at this. They notice and then they do the thing that they need to do.
Yeah.
If they have some resourcing
It's
to do that,
interesting that
right?
kids are really good
They
at that.
do that. And somewhere along the way, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 24, we train our kiddos to shut down that internal sort of processing and insight and to just suck it up or label it or work through it or push it away. But like little kids deeply know what they need. They feel it in their bodies. I mean, this is even positive emotion, right? So how many adults do you know walk into a grocery store, hear some music, and just start like dancing, like full body dance? No.
But so many kids.
So
if
many
they
kids
heard their
do.
favorite
Yeah.
song.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're
They
happy.
feel happy. They're jumping.
Yeah.
Full body movement. We really do a disservice to, just shut that down. They know what they need. Adults, if we give space to notice without judgment, we also know what we need.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, if you see me dancing in the grocery store, now you know why.
Yeah, she's meeting a need.
I'm harnessing my inner little Jill.
One of the hard things I think is when we maybe notice it in somebody else. What's your suggestion for those that maybe see it in a spouse or significant other or in their kids? I mean, how do you approach that?
That's our biggest resource. Again, being connected creatures, connected mammals. I mean, my primary role as a therapist, and I tell this to my clients all the time, is like, here's my role is to sit with you and help you observe yourself, because being able to observe yourself is really difficult. And so if there's people around you in those connected, trusted, safe relationships that can provide some insight into, you look really dysregulated right now. What can I do? What do you feel like you need? Trying to, again, listen, notice without the judgments. People around us can see that dysregulation. When we're just trying to shut it down, it's not a good experience maybe. And so no fault of ours for trying to shut it down. But it doesn't just go away. Is the thing. If that worked, we wouldn't be where we're at. So yeah, we need to try other stuff. We need to depend on those connected relationships to help us observe ourselves. Yeah.
It's fascinating how much you're mentioning this concept of like judgment and labeling. I remember, I'd hate to count, maybe 20 years ago or 15 to 20 years ago, I got a book with a CD. I wish I could remember the author. I think it was Jack something, but it was Intro to Meditation for Beginners, something like that. And there was a CD with it. And I'm like, I'm going to learn to meditate. And I loved it. I loved it so much because of how profound it was to me that he said over and over and over, focus only on your breathing. You're going to find your mind wandering. Don't judge yourself. Don't get mad at yourself. Oh, there, I bet your mind wandered again. Like, he was much more graceful than I am. But he repeated over and over, basically, I bet you're not succeeding because you've never done this before.
Yeah, exactly right.
Don't put yourself down. Don't hate yourself. Don't think you're a failure. And I remember that, like, years later being really like, okay, no, I'm just doing. It doesn't matter if it's always right or wrong. So it's an interesting concept. And along those same lines, right, is just this concept of balance, right? So finding work-life balance, kids, all of it. How do you obtain like a healthy work-life balance? Because you take on a lot in your day, right? You're listening to people's struggles and concerns, and that I can imagine can feel really big sometimes. So how do you balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in the same boat of struggling to know how to do that. On any day, any time of the day, it might be different. And I think for me, certainly during my client days, it's just giving myself that 2-minute deep breath, or walk, or pacing, or sometimes running my hands under cold water to make sure, again, I'm grounded in myself, that I'm leaving one client's session and walking kind of fresh into the other. I'm piggybacking a little bit and overlapping with Steve's, 5 gears, right? Of how are we intentionally shifting our energy? So it's really more energy management than stress management of what level of energy do I need to do this next thing, and how can I know for myself how to ramp up my energy and how to decrease my energy to what the need is. And that, like you're referring to, it takes practice. It takes practice. I mean, for me, inherently, my tendency is to just run it hard. I have high expectations for myself and usually don't give myself that pause. And so it's more of an intentional pause, whatever that looks like, that's on my daily practice list in whatever way, whether it's with my kids, at work, with friends, and being able to know for myself what I'm needing and to allow myself permission. So like, if a girlfriend calls me and I just don't have the energy, I might not take that call, and I'm not going to have guilt about that. I don't have the energy to give to it. It's not that I don't want the connection. It's not that I don't want the relationship, but just for my own self of energy management. It's a practice. I don't always do it right. Today I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm feeling good today.
I was just say, maybe the younger generation has this figured out, because every younger person that I work with I know they're looking at their phone going, nah, not talking Roman today. Like, if I send them a text, they'll answer right away. But if it's a phone call, and then especially if you try like a video call, it's almost like, why is this guy calling me right now? Like, doesn't he know how to video chat, or doesn't he know how to?
And it's so funny how different generations view this concept of instantly being able to reach somebody. Like, I remember a time where if you needed to reach my parents, you called the house, you left a message on the answering machine. If we got home past 10, no one was returning a call. Yep. You could wait 24 full hours to hear back from somebody, and that was acceptable. Crazy. And now there's just, like you say, I cannot answer that phone call and not judge myself. We don't have to be available to everyone 24/7, but there is a stigma that is what we're supposed to be, is available all the time. And that's a huge responsibility.
So what you're saying is we've done this to ourselves.
We have. We absolutely
done this to ourselves with technology. We're not designed to be able to answer immediately.
But I think some of these younger kids might help turn us around. I think we kind of make fun of them. Oh, they never answer their phones. Half of them don't even have their voicemail set up.
No,
that's very true.
Maybe they'll retrain us a little bit. Maybe they're like, I don't know, text me. I'll get back to you when I want to. That's okay. A little more of that is okay.
I would use text messages a lot more if I had the ability to read it and then mark it as unread.
I agree.
So I could go back
like
or
emails.
Flag it or something like that. Yeah. And maybe that's possible, and I'm just not smart enough to know that yet. And I'm sure there's an app for it or something.
Someone will message you right away.
Yeah.
Well, and I think in some ways, we can start to have those conversations in our circles of like, look, this isn't about our relationship when I don't respond.
Yeah.
I might not respond, so resetting what that expectation is of, when I'm at home, 9 times out of 10, when I'm with my boys, my phone's on the counter.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I'm just not going to engage. So if it's a crisis, if it's an emergency, you're going to have to call a friend and call a friend and call a friend, because I might not be available.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in the chaos of everything that's going on some days, sometimes the proverbial crap is actually hitting the fan, right? It's chaos. What's your advice for someone to calm themselves down just a little bit and be able to focus in?
Yeah. So if we're at that shit's hitting the fan part, and we don't know what to do, any and all ways that we can try to tap into literal rhythm. Okay, so swiveling in your chair, maybe, kind of pacing that. Rhythmic breathing, pace breathing can work. Sometimes it's going for a walk, and not mindlessly going for a walk. It's like we're going to go around the block and we're going to be calling left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. So again, thinking of the brain, when we're stressed, that biological process, we need rhythm, routine, predictability. So even if we can get it for 30 seconds, 2 minutes, we do start to notice that settling in our body if we can allow the pause. The challenge is the pause.
Yes.
It is hard.
It is hard.
It is hard, and it's not intuitive. So that, it's we're actually more productive the more breaks we take. Mm-hmm. Not intuitive. We do not do that. I don't do that. But studies are out there.
I've read a million articles about it. Do I do it? No. Yeah. Do I encourage others to? Sure I do.
Yeah.
On the last episode of our podcast, like we said, we talked to Kirk from Iron Jungle CrossFit, and we talked a lot about physical health and New Year's resolutions. We touched on a little bit. Do you do New Year's resolutions?
I don't do resolutions per se. I do intentions.
Sure.
And I, what's going to be my set intention for the year, loosely. I think anytime, Mondays, Januaries, anytime Mondays. For any of us that we feel some energy or some activation towards like a fresh start, I think we should just leverage it to its
Sure.
fullest, right? Of like, that's whatever that means to people. Sometimes it's spring break. Sometimes it's when the snow finally melts. Whatever that internal sense of like space is coming, a fresh start is coming, just full on hit it hard, with whatever the intention is, right?
Yeah.
Take advantage of the energy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's one goal that you'd like to accomplish in the next 10 years?
10 years, that's far.
Okay, 6 months. No, I'm kidding.
6 months. I think something that I continue to practice is deepening connections with other people. It's really easy for me. Maybe you guys know this about me. It's really easy to connect with me to a certain point. And so it's a intentional practice for me to just be able to feel comfortable kind of stepping in and deepening whatever relationship is out there. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Candace, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We appreciate you coming by our little studio here. It was really informative and helpful, and hopefully we're able to help others. If someone would like to reach out and talk to you, how would they do that?
Yeah, so you can give me a call directly, email me at NorthStar Counseling Center. I'm also starting up my own practice in Dassel, so modernmindstherapy.com.
Nice, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm very open, and that's an intention for me of very happy to take phone calls. I just, I have one scheduled at just a consult call on Monday. I had one earlier in the week, so I'm open to just navigating the questions. There is zero assumption if you're contacting me that you're in need of professional services, of just, hey, give me some insight, some language around what am I experiencing, resourcing to go. So very open to have that conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for listening to this episode of Hometown Conversations. We're off to a great start for Season 3. If you have an idea for an episode, please let us know. You can always contact us through our Facebook page at Hometown Conversations or via Twitter at Htown Convos. You can also now check us out via YouTube. Just look up Hometown Conversations and look for Roman Blemke out there, and you should have a pretty easy time finding it. Thanks again, everybody. Until next time, have a great week.